Mount Suribachi rose like a silent guardian over the black beaches of Iwo Jima. Not a benevolent guardian, but a volcanic sentinel, ancient and unforgiving. Its silhouette cut the Pacific sky like a threat sculpted from ash and rock. When the first American Marines landed on that morning of February 19, 1945, Suribachi was already watching them. At 169 meters high, 554 feet, that mountain wasn't just a geographical feature. It was the beating heart of the Japanese defense, the all-seeing eye, the all-crushing fist. And the trails that led to its summit, not roads, never roads, were corridors of death, every step marked by the crossfire of invisible enemies. The Japanese, under the visionary command of General Tadamichi Kurabayashi, had transformed Iwo Jima into an underground fortress. Forget the shallow trenches of the First World War or the linear defenses of the early Pacific. Here, warfare was reinvented. More than 11 miles of tunnels snaked beneath the island, connecting over 1,000 defensive positions. Reinforced concrete bunkers, camouflaged machine gun nests, artillery chambers with steel doors that opened only to fire and slammed shut before the American response could arrive. On Suribachi alone, some 2,000 Japanese soldiers were dug in like specters, ready to fight to their last breath. The road to the top was, in reality, a series of steep, rugged trails, made of loose volcanic rock that slipped under the boots and knees of the men. Every meter of ascent was swept by deadly crossfire. Captain Dave Severance, commander of Easy Company, 28th Marine Regiment, would later describe Iwo Jima as the worst place I ever fought. A hell where you couldn't see the enemy, where the terrain was open and cruel, and where living in foxholes was terrible and tedious. But it was he who would lead the unit that, in 4 days of relentless combat, would write one of the bloodiest pages in American military history. The first assaults on Suribachi began on February 20th, the day after the landing. The 28th Regiment was assigned the task. Progress wasn't measured in miles, but in meters, and every meter cost lives. Conventional frontal assault tactics resulted in carnage. The Marines learned quickly. A new dance was required, a choreography of death. Assault teams advanced under heavy cover from machine guns and mortars. Out front, flamethrower operators and smoke grenadiers prepared the way. Then came the bunker hunters, with explosives and pistols, entering every opening, every fissure in the rock, to clear out what the flamethrowers hadn't burned. One of these men was Corporal Charles Chuck Lindbergh, a flamethrower operator from Easy Company. He not only fought in the ascent, he participated in the first flag raising on Suribachi's summit on the morning of February 23rd. Years later, upon seeing Joe Rosenthal's famous photograph, which shows the second flag raising, Lindbergh would comment sadly, "Somebody asked me if I wanted to see the first flag raising. I said, yeah. I looked at that picture and I said, no. That's not the way we did it." His memory was clear. The true sacrifice happened before the photographed glory. Another central name is Sergeant Henry "Hank" Hansen. He was among the 6 men who raised that first flag on Suribachi's summit. Unfortunately, Hansen didn't live to see the fame of that image. He was killed in action 2 days later on March 1st, 1945. Although the quote attributed to him, "It was like climbing a giant anthill," does not appear in primary records, it perfectly embodies the collective experience of the Marines. For every position destroyed, others emerged. The enemy was everywhere, even under their feet, thanks to the interconnected tunnels. The geography of Suribachi made every movement an almost supernatural ordeal. The porous, unstable volcanic rock caused men to slip even without enemy fire. Carrying equipment that could weigh over 30 kilos, 70 pounds, with rifles, ammunition, grenades, and water, climbing was an act of sheer will. The steep slopes forced frequent stops, and every pause was a potential death sentence. Hidden snipers, often in caves above or behind the American lines, had easy targets. The heat of the tropical sun added to the residual heat of the dormant volcano, creating a natural oven. And everywhere, the acrid smell of sulfur, The smell of hell itself reminded everyone they were fighting not on a battlefield, but in the navel of the burning earth. But the story doesn't only belong to the attackers. From the tunnels, the Japanese defenders also wrote their testimonies. Although the Lieutenant Kiyoshi Endo, mentioned in popular accounts, has no confirmed historical record, his feelings were real. Diaries recovered from Japanese officers reveal desperation, determination, and an involuntary admiration for the enemy. General Kurabayashi, in his letters to his family, wrote, "I promised to fight to the death for my family, but the thought of family makes it difficult to keep that promise." He knew Iwo Jima was indefensible in the long run, but his mission was to delay the Americans as long as possible, to turn every meter of the island into a grave. And the Marines kept coming, wave after wave. Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson, commander of the 2nd Battalion, watched from his forward command post. Upon seeing the first flag fluttering on the summit at 10:20 a.m. on the morning of February 23rd, he reportedly said, "That flag's too small. Let's get a bigger one up there." Thus, the second flag raising was born, the one immortalized by Joe Rosenthal. The first flag, 54 by 28 inches, had come from the transport US Missoula. The second was larger, more visible, and its raising, captured in a fraction of a second, became the ultimate symbol of American sacrifice in World War II. But what few know is that the summit of Suribachi was not secure. The flag waved over abandoned positions. The Japanese had retreated into the deeper tunnels, preparing counterattacks. The fighting on the slopes continued for 2 more full days after the flag raising. Easy Company, which began with about 250 men, finished the battle with only 35 combat-ready fighters, a casualty rate of over 80%. In total, it's estimated that about 900 Marines were killed or wounded in the first 5 days of combat for Suribachi alone. Corporal Richard Wheeler, who survived that hellish climb, would write decades later the book The Bloody Battle for Suribachi *, one of the most powerful and authentic narratives of the battle. In it, he describes not glory, but exhaustion, terror, and camaraderie forged in fire. Years after the war, Wheeler summarized the experience with words that echo to this day. "We didn't climb a mountain. We climbed an altar where human sacrifice was offered in quantities that none of us could comprehend. And when we reached the top, we understood that the view was not one of triumph, but of the price we had paid for every inch of that damned mountain." And that price was immense. The Battle of Iwo Jima lasted 36 days, from February 19th to March 26, 1945. In the end, of the 20,000 Japanese defenders, only 1,083 survived, most captured by force, as their code of honor forbade surrender. On the American side, casualties exceeded 26,000 men, including 6,800 dead. On Suribachi alone, hundreds of resistance pockets had to be cleared with flamethrowers, grenades, and sheer courage. The road to the summit was forever marked. Destroyed equipment, unburied bodies, bunker entrances blackened by fire, and the persistent smell of death. Today, Rosenthal's photograph is a national symbol. The statue at the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington is an eternal tribute. But the men who were there knew the truth. Glory is an illusion that comes later. In those days of February 1945, there were no heroes. There were only ordinary men, terrified, exhausted, covered in volcanic ash and blood, fighting to survive and to protect the man next to them. 75 years later, and now in 2025, 80 years later, the story of Suribachi remains an enduring testament to both human courage and the terrible cost of war. The trails that led to its top may have been covered by time and sparse vegetation, but the memories of those who walked them, Americans and Japanese, remain alive. Because some victories, no matter how iconic, are bought with a price that can never be truly paid, only remembered. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson of Iwo Jima. True heroism is not found in the grand, photographed gesture, but in the everyday decision to take one more step, even when everything around you is in flames.